podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
The Two-Footed Podcast is brought to you by EPLindex.com and our presenting sponsor, Liberty Shield. Liberty Shield is a VPN provider. A virtual privacy network allows you to go online, change your location, access things you're geo-blocked from, while keeping your data safe. So, as an example, if you are a UK expat and want access to BBC iPlayer to watch Match of the Day, or ITV Hub, or all four, but you get that message that says this content is not available in your location, a Liberty Shield VPN gets you around that block, allows you to watch whatever you want on those services while also keeping your data safe. And it goes further than that. It allows you to open up Netflix's entire library by just changing your IP address. Liberty Shield is the #1 rated VPN provider on Trustpilot with 5-star ratings across the board. So go to libertyshield.com right now, use the code EPL25 and get either the hardware package or the software package. The hardware package is a router that you plug into your existing router, and any item you want to change the IP address on, be it your phone or your television, you connect that to the new Liberty Shield router. All other items can remain connected to your existing router. There's also a software package which is instantly downloadable to your device and you can get using straight away. Again, libertyshield.com, EPL25 for 25% off at checkout. We're also brought to you by Home of Hopcroft, a giftware and homeware company located in Scotland but shipping worldwide. Check out homeofhopcroft.co.uk and do check out the EPL Index and Anfield Index shops, which you'll find on Etsy. Use the codes EPL10 or RED10 for 10% off at checkout. And lastly, do remember to check out A Tad Predictable, hosted by Tadiwa. That podcast is on this feed before every Premier League match week. And then the EPL Roundtable, hosted by Kevin DeVries, on its own EPL Roundtable feed. So just search EPL Roundtable in your podcast device. And that's out after every match week. Now, on with the show. What's good, boys and girls? Two-Footed Podcast. Today is Monday. It is December 4th. Hope you're all well. 3 weeks to Christmas. Hope you're all started on your shopping and not going to leave it till Christmas Eve. That's the mark of a person who's not all there, because you've got to go and deal with the lunacy that takes place on Christmas Eve everywhere. Get your shopping done now, folks. Trust me. Right. Let's get into the weekend's games. We had 10 of them. There was madness in at least 3 of them. Absolute madness. And one very notable result that's probably going to lead to somebody losing their job this week. We'll start off with Brentford versus Luton. Brentford 3, Luton 1. Neil Maupay, his second goal of the season. Good to see him finally ending that big long drought that he'd had with these 2 goals. And he is providing good value on this loan for Brentford because he's always been hardworking. He's the type of centre forward who occupies defenders, and he's probably a nightmare to play against because he's really hardworking. He's very niggly. There's a lot of needle with him. He loves the physical side of it, and then he's also very good at drawing fouls and stuff. So Neil Maupay doing a very good job there for Brentford. Ben Mee scored their second. Jacob Brown did pull one back for Luton, but Shandon Baptiste, after a bit of a scuffly mess in the Luton area, managed to toe poke home their third. That's a really good win for Brentford, obviously, against a newly promoted team, a game they were expected to win. But considering some of their recent performances, it wasn't a shoo-in that they would win it. So they get 3 points. That actually lifted them into the top half for a night, at least. But overall, considering no Ivan Toney, I think if you'd said to Brentford, 14 games, you'll win 5, you'll draw 4, and you'll have a positive goal differential, I think they'd have been really happy. I think they would have been really happy because Ivan Toney's not just their main goal scorer, he's also their best player. And we're seeing with certain other teams, including the defending champions, you take the best player out of any team and it's going to have a big effect. So I think Brentford will be chuffed with how things have gone so far. For Luton, I'm not sure this was one they would have expected to go and win because Brentford are generally very good at home. They did give up 3 goals, but they put up a pretty good showing for themselves. They did cause Brentford some problems. Right now, they're still 2 points outside the relegation zone. Now, obviously, we know that that's because Everton had the 10-point deduction. But Luton live to fight another day outside the Premier League's drop zone. And they're just continuing to play their football. Like, they're doing what they do. And I do admire that. I do admire the fact that Rob Edwards and the club have come up. They've been completely unapologetic about their approach. We know that what they did with their Premier League money was build a team for next season's championship. With the view of, look, we're probably going to go down because they needed everything. Like coming up, they needed an entire new team if they really wanted to stay in this division. But what they've done is they've come up, they've added a bunch of good championship caliber players, some of whom are doing well in the Premier League, it obviously has to be said. But it puts them in a great position if and when they go down. Now, the thing is, they also figured out we play a brand of football that nobody really likes to play against. Nobody's going to enjoy playing Luton this season. Certainly they'll get walloped a couple of times. As yet, they haven't been absolutely trounced, but someone will wallop them at some point, and probably a couple of times. Because it happens to all newly promoted teams. But the whole thing is, maybe, just maybe things will break our way. And maybe we can scrape together enough points to survive. And if we do, then going into year 2, then we can afford to go and spend more money on trying to get a year 3 in the league. But if we don't, we haven't overextended ourselves. We haven't spent beyond our means. In fact, what we've done is we've banked a whole lot of cash, which is going to come in real handy because they're going to be looking to build a new stadium in the next couple of years. We're setting ourselves up well so that if we do go down, we'll be in a strong position to come straight back up. There doesn't seem to be any pressure on the manager. Now, I'm assuming that barring some sort of 10-game losing streak where they get trounced a bunch of times, he's probably had a conversation with the owners pre-season about the next 3 to 5 years for the club and what that looks like. And they've probably come to an agreement of, yes, the likelihood is we're not staying up. But that doesn't put Rob Edwards' job under pressure. What that does, it allows him to continue to build, to be true to what he wants and what he believes in, his style of play, to build a culture at the club, not the type of culture we see among fan bases. I'm talking about culture in the group. They seem like a really strong, connected group that play together. And huge credit for that does have to go to previous managers, but I do think he in particular has had a big, big role in that. Because he took over under strange circumstances where Nathan Jones had obviously walked out for the second time mid-season, gone off to live his Premier League dreams, and Rob Edwards, who'd been cast off by Watford, was seen as a bit of, oh, that's a strange pick. He's come in, he's done an incredible job, and everybody's rallied together. They got promoted, and this season they do seem to have a really strong mentality, where even when the game is away from them, they're still going. They're not giving up. Not once this season have I seen a single Luton head drop. Not once. And that's a really positive sign. So, yeah, I think they are ultimately going to get relegated. That's been my prediction since preseason. But I do feel like for the long-term future of the club, this season is going exactly as they want it to go. Because they're showing that they can match teams in the Premier League. They can cause everybody a little bit of trouble. No one wants to play them. No one's looking forward to it. And they're getting valuable experience for some of the younger members of this squad who they'll be thinking, if we go down and come back up for the 25-26 season, the experience gained in this season will prove really, really important. Brentford ended the weekend in 11th, Luton ended in 17th. Moving on. Arsenal 2, Wolverhampton Wanderers 1. Bukayo Saka on 6 minutes, Martin Odegaard with a well-worked goal on 13. The Saka one had a little bit of fortune and some very, very poor defending, but the Odegaard goal was lovely and really well worked. And after that, I mean, it was a very straightforward game for Arsenal. Wolves missing a couple of key players, most notably, obviously, Pedro Neto. And I do feel like if they'd had him, they really could have gotten at this Arsenal team, because there are large gaps in this Arsenal team. When Rice plays the six because he doesn't have the positional and tactical discipline and wants to kind of pick the ball up and move forward with it, it does leave gaps between midfield and defence. And that's the type of area that Neto has really been thriving in this season. 8 assists for Pedro Neto in like less than 900 minutes this season. And a lot of it is picking that ball up in that space between defence and midfield. And when he's driving at a defender, there's very little they can do. Like 1v1, he's pretty much unstoppable right now, or he was before the injury. I think if they'd had him with Cunha, because that combination are just so exciting and so electric, I do think they could have caused Arsenal a lot of problems, but Arsenal would probably have been more disciplined. Now, Wolves did get one back in the 86th minute through Matthias Cunha. You did think maybe they're going to sneak something here, but then Eddie Nketiah actually missed a big chance, hitting the post for what should have been a third goal to wrap things up. So Arsenal are top of the league, and they'll be very, very pleased to be in that position. Now, of course, they were top of the league last season after 14 games, and it's notable that they are 4 points worse off this season than they were last season, despite a similarly straightforward run. I would actually argue that last season they probably had a tougher first 14 games than they've had this season, but it is what it is. They are top, and that's all they can really expect. For Wolves, they are 13th. That is now 3 defeats in 4, but there is some positive news on the horizon with the return of Neto. And I think in January, we might see Gary O'Neill back to bring in a couple of players as well, because the ownership situation has been a little bit chaotic. There's been a lot of talk about whether or not they're still invested in the club. They made a big point of coming out after the transfer window and sort of explaining why they hadn't been able to spend a huge amount. And one big part of it was they had commitments due for Cunha and for Traore, and they'd also spent in January to back Lopetegui. So that was a big part of it. They were up against the FFP wall. I think in January, we'll see them spend to some extent. I don't think it'll be, they're not going to spend 100 million, but they might spend 40 to 50, and Gary O'Neill should be able to add 2, maybe even 3 good young players to this group. I think a centre-back is absolutely high on the agenda. One blow, they did lose Jose Sa in that game yesterday to injury, so we'll have to see how that plays out moving forward, because they really can't afford to be without him. They have been linked to Ramsdale, funnily enough, of late. I don't know if that's the right move for them, but I think they may want to look into getting at least a very high-profile young goalkeeper, or high-talent young goalkeeper that they can maybe develop behind Sa to take over in 18 months. That might be the play for them. But all things considered, like considering pre-season, there were a lot of concerns about Wolves with the whole Lopetegui thing. I do think they'd be happy enough with where they are. Like they're 8 points clear of the relegation zone. And I know things are tight down at the bottom. There's only, from Chelsea on 19, who are 10th, to Bournemouth on 13, who are 16th. Like that's a very tight group. But the most important factor is the gap then to the other teams, to your Lutons, your Evertons, your Burnleys, and your Sheffield Uniteds. And Wolves rather, they're in a pretty strong position to stay in the division. And that's really the only mandate they're going to have this season, is to stay in the division. Because, as I mentioned, they didn't get to spend huge amounts in the summer. They did spend some money, but obviously that was mitigated by the fact that they sold Ruben Neves, which kind of, I wouldn't imagine their net spend was more than 20 million, maybe. Let's have a quick look. Transfers in Cunha. They spent 54, 65, 80. To be fair, they spent about 85 million. Now they did sell Matthias. Actually, to be fair, they sold Matthias Nunes and they sold Nathan Collins and Connor Cody and Raul Jimenez. So they did actually make a significant profit in the summer. I'd say they've also probably gotten some decent loan fees, loaning out the likes of Mosquera and Goncalo Guedes. But when we factor in that they also spent in January, let's see, in January they spent 10, 20, 25. They spent about 40 million in January. So over the two windows, they probably did about break even. And I think they'll spend again come this January, or at least I hope they will, to back a manager who I think has done a really good job in Gary O'Neill. Moving on. Burnley 5, Sheffield United 0. This is probably the end for Paul Heckingbottom, and John Percy has reported that it is expected that they will part ways. Now, they're playing Wednesday night, so this is a tough time to make a change. You've got a game on Wednesday, then a game again on the weekend, and they're playing Liverpool on Wednesday night, and then they're home to Brentford on the weekend. But with all this out there, Paul Heckingbottom has to know that he's getting the sack. The issue for them is that after Brentford, they go Chelsea away, Aston Villa away, then Luton home, and then Man City away. You almost think, are they better off waiting, just getting through these 6 games? Which, like, let's be honest, how many points are we expecting them to take? I would estimate 4. I think they could get a point at home to Brentford, and I think they can beat Luton home. I wouldn't give them any chance at all of getting anything off Liverpool, Chelsea, Villa, or Man City. So, with or without Heckingbottom, what is really going to change there? I don't know that a new manager bump will be enough with this run of games. You're nearly better off waiting and trying to get it when you've got Sheffield, obviously you've got West Ham home, Palace away, Villa home, different animal to Villa away, then Luton home. You'd nearly be better off trying to get your new manager bounced through those games. You've also got Brighton home and then Wolves away. Brighton home is a game you could maybe get a point in. Wolves away, you could maybe go there and get something. This next group of games, I just don't see it for them. I think best case scenario, regardless of who the manager is probably 4 points. But it's got to be hard for Heckingbottom if they were to say to him, look, we're going to hang on to you for another while anyway, and we'll see. Like he knows he's going to get sacked at some point. But credit to him, he turns up, he does his work, he does his job. He's doing the best he can with what he's been dealt. But they were dealt a hammering by Burnley at the weekend. Jay Rodriguez, Jakob Brun-Larsen, Ziki Amdoni, Luka Kolyoshu, who's so exciting, and a really nice strike from Josh Brownhill. to give them the win. Ollie McBurney sent off on the stroke of half time because he's just an idiot. Like, he's just an idiot. He gets booked for jumping and leading with his elbow. And you think, right, you're actually really fortunate to stay on the pitch because that was a horror show. That was an actual horror show, that first one, on 37 minutes. Then O'Shea gets booked a minute later, and you think that's a little bit of payback there. But you think, right, McBurney now needs to settle himself down. And 7 minutes later, he's throwing his elbow into O'Shea again, and he's getting himself sent off. And it was only 2-0 at that point. And at 2-0, you still have a chance. Alex Ferguson used to say 2-0 is the most dangerous lead in football. 1-0 is really the most dangerous lead in football, but he used to say 2-0 because at 2-0 teams will often get complacent. This was at 1-0, you're more likely to stay focused and be diligent. But at 2-0, you can let that drop. And if the other team get a couple of quick goals, all of a sudden the whole momentum of the game goes towards them. But he just gets himself sent off, and that's it, game over. And Burnley, to their credit, put them to the sword second half. And it was good to see from a Burnley perspective that they did go ruthlessly for the throat and not just lay off, because there's been games recently where they've been ahead and let up. So Burnley win. It's only their second win of the season. It helps their goal difference massively. They go from -22 to now -17, which is a bit more respectable. They're level in points with Everton. They're 2 points behind Luton, 6 points behind Bournemouth. And that's where they need to be aiming, is Bournemouth. Like, you've got to try and keep pace with Bournemouth and the likes of Forest. And if you can, the teams above that, Fulham, Wolves, Palace, etc. Big, big win for Burnley. Big, big lift for the club. Should raise some of the expectations within the club, within the playing staff, of what they're capable of. Should lift some of the pressure off Vincent Kompany. They absolutely needed that win. 2 more teams that needed wins in our next game. Nottingham Forest versus Everton. I don't really know how Everton won this game, because neither team played particularly well, but Forest were the better of the not playing well teams. Now, in credit to Everton, they scored the only goal of the game, and they had another one cleared off the line. Murillo doing very, very well to clear off the line from a Dwight McNeil shot. And it was Dwight McNeil who scored the only goal of the game. And this is a typical Dwight McNeil moment where he sort of loafs into the box at the back post, takes a touch, and it's just, from a technical point of view, it's picture perfect. The technique, the strike, the angle of the ball, it's a really, really good goal. And he's a really good player. As I've been saying for a long time, he's a really good player. The only question mark over Dwight McNeil is often application. But I think that's often unfair. I think because of how he plays and his gait, he often looks like he's not fully going at 100%. But I think that just is him at 100%. I would nickname Dwight McNeil slow-mo, because even when he's sprinting, it looks like he's moving in slow motion. And he does everything very deliberately. The technical level is absolutely elite. It's that lack of pace that holds him back. If he had elite pace, he'd be playing for a top 4 club, because he's a great dribbler, he's a great passer, he's an incredible crosser of the ball. He strikes the ball beautifully. He's very good from set pieces. He works like an absolute dog. It's the lack of elite level pace, and the lack of any real pace, if we're being honest. Like, if he gets moving over distance, then he can really travel. What I love about him is how he changes his speed, how he changes his tempo, because he knows he's not going to run away from everybody. So what he'll often do is he'll slow himself right the way down. And not to compare them as players, because they're nothing like each other as well, there's some similarities, but they're not like each other as players. And there's a huge gulf in the caliber of the players. But the way he carries the ball reminds me a little bit of Juan Carlos Valeron, who had varying levels of speed he could move at, but all of them were slow. But yet he could still outpace a defender by changing his pace as he was moving, by slowing down and then speeding up and gaining himself maybe a 2 to 3 yard lead on his defender. Then they'd get back to him and he'd slow it right down again. He'd use his body really well. And McNeil does stuff like that, not to the same level, not to the same extent, and obviously in different areas of the pitch because he plays wide, whereas Valeron played as a 10. But he has that aspect of his game, which is really beneficial for him in creating space. Now, he's currently playing opposite Jack Harrison, and Harrison and him do overlap in some ways, but both of them have a great technical level. And like, I look at that Everton team and I still can't figure out how they're this bad. Now, they've won a game. And look, if it wasn't for the points deduction, to be fair to them, they'd be 12th. They would be 12th. So Everton would be having what we would describe, I think, as a pretty good season if it wasn't for the points deduction. But even at that, I'm still sort of left wondering how it is that they've needed this recent run where this is their fourth win. I think fourth win in 6 games or 7 games. I'm just wondering how it was they had such a poor start. Because there's a lot of good players. Now, it's partly Dyche's fault because he keeps using Ashley Young when they've got a better right back sat on the bench. But like, there's a lot of good players in this team. Tarkowski and Branthwaite have formed a really, really good pairing. Michaelenko's having a tremendous season. McNeil and him now have developed good chemistry. Harrison's playing pretty well. Garner's a good player. Doucouré is a very effective player. They've got Onana to come back in. They've got Calvert-Lewin to come back in. They've got Arnaut Danjuma sat on the bench. They've got Ben Godfrey sat on the bench. Like, Everton have a 13, 14, 15-man group that really should never have any relegation concerns. But it's something in the water there, in the mentality there, that ends up causing them to go on these longer runs that they have where they don't win anything. You know, they end up getting 1 point from a possible 20 or 21. That's the type of thing that hurts Everton. There's no reason that they should ever have been in a relegation scrap. But credit to Dyche. He'll keep them up this year, even with the points deduction. Now, if another points deduction comes, that could kill them. Because it's one thing getting it once and fighting back from it. It's another thing if they get hammered again. Like, let's say that they do get another 10 points and they get dropped to -3 and they're looking at it and thinking, we should have 17 points and we've got -3. And now, instead of being 12th where we should be, we're bottom, and not just bottom, but we're 12 points from safety. Like, that type of psychological blow can be massive. As it is, from the first one, they've responded really well. From when the news broke that they were going to get the points deduction, they've responded really well. They beat Bournemouth. They beat West Ham. They got a draw against Brighton. They beat Crystal Palace. They've now beaten Forest. That's really good. Really, really good. Remember, they also went and they beat Brentford away. But you look at those results and you compare them to, you lost at home to Luton. You lost at home to Fulham. You lost at home to Wolves. You drew with Sheffield United. Like, I don't mind when you lose to Arsenal. Don't mind when you lose to Liverpool or United. Now, you shouldn't be losing 3-0 to United. And to their credit, they played okay in that game. But, you know, you really shouldn't be losing at home to Luton. That's the type of result that's just very Everton. But I do think they're going to stay up. I had them picked to go down, and I was wrong. They're a better team than I thought they were. It's not that I knew they had good players, but good players doesn't always equate to a good team. But Dyche is turning those good players into a good team. And, you know, I should have guessed he would. because I've always been a fan of Sean Dyche. When he was Burnley manager, I used to laud him on this podcast. So, you know. For Forest, there's 3 defeats on the bounce and 4 defeats in 5. No, sorry, it's not. They won. It is 3 defeats in a row, isn't it? Yeah, they lost to West Ham, they lost to Brighton, and they lost to Everton. They beat Villa 4 games ago. That seems like, it doesn't seem like it's that long ago. I'd imagine pressure is starting to build a little bit on Steve Cooper now. They've got Fulham away next, then Wolves away. They're not a very good away team. Then they get Spurs home, then Bournemouth home. I think Steve Cooper's going to have to start getting some points. Now, look, I said this to Guy on Friday. They sack him. He's in another job within a month if he wants to be. If Burnley were to sack Company, I think they'd go for Cooper. Sheffield United would go for Cooper. I think Palace would take him in a heartbeat. I think if Bournemouth decided to make a move, which I don't think they will because they've really turned things around, I think he'd be on their list. Steve Cooper's a really good manager. But right now he's not doing a very good job. And that's going to need to improve. Newcastle won, Manchester United 0. I don't know how this ended 1-0. I don't know how Newcastle didn't win by 3 or 4. Is any takeaway I had from that game? Newcastle battered them. This was a very one-sided game. United were not good at all. Rashford is in dreadful form. Much of it goes on the manager. Why are you playing Rashford left wing to fit Garnacho in rather than just playing Garnacho right wing? Garnacho is not a better left winger than Marcus Rashford. And Marcus Rashford is a shell of himself playing on the right. I also don't understand how it is that in the year of our Lord 2023, Anthony Martial is still getting game time for Manchester United. I really, really do struggle to grasp that. Other things I'm struggling with. Why are you playing a right back at left back when you've got a left back playing centre back and another left back on the bench? And why are you playing a left back at centre back when you've got 2 centre backs on the bench? Like there's no logic to a Luke Shaw, Harry Maguire centre back pairing with Wan-Bissaka and Dalot flanking them. There's no logic to that at all. This is not a good manager. And this is not a manager with a plan. They've played 5 top half teams this season, and they've lost to all of them. All of them. And it's not like they're even hugely competitive in these games. The Arsenal game, they were pretty competitive in. But they weren't competitive here. They weren't competitive against Brighton. They weren't competitive against City. Like, this is not a good team. There's a lot of good players, but it's not a good team. And they play Chelsea next on Wednesday night. Now, Chelsea are just about a top half team. United have to win that game. Then they play Bournemouth. Then they've got Bayern. And if they don't beat Bayern, they're out of the European Cup. Then they go to Anfield. Then they go to the London Stadium. Then they play Villa. That's a horrible run over Christmas. They do get Forest away then after that, and they'll expect to win that. And they got their usual cushy third round FA Cup draw. And we'll talk about the draw after the break. But like that's United, they've got to get something from this Chelsea game. And then they've got to beat Bournemouth. Because I'm seeing a loss to Bayern, a loss to Liverpool, at best a draw away to West Ham, probably a defeat. And I think Villa will beat them. I don't know that Eric Ten Hag is going to be Manchester United manager come the third round FA Cup game. I really don't. They are so, so poor. They're really poorly coached. Toon, on the other hand, really well coached. Really, really well coached. Newcastle are sixth. They go above Manchester United with that win. They've now won 3 of 4. They are now 3 points off the top 4 and closing in, looking like the team that we saw last year. Gamerish is back to playing at an exceptionally high level. And there was a lot of talk pre-game about Kobe Manu. And he does look a player. Like, there's no doubt he does look a player. But it's worth pointing out, his team have been outplayed in both games that he started. Whereas Lewis Miley, playing for Newcastle, like, he's not getting even a fraction of the same level of hype. And for me, I think he looks a considerably more mature player, despite the fact he's only 17. I think Lewis Miley looks like a hell of a prospect. Toon, in my view, have a very special player on their hands, because it's not just about the physicality, which is good, the ball playing ability, which is good. It's the brain. It's the choices he makes. It's how mature he looks. He doesn't look like a 17-year-old. I don't think Lewis Miley is getting the hype because people just are overlooking the fact that he's 17. He won't even turn 18 until May. This is a child who's out there playing. And yet he doesn't look like a child. He's playing like a grown man. As the biggest compliment you can give him, he doesn't look like a kid playing one of their first games. He looks like he's been there for years. Moving on then. Next up on Sunday, we had Chelsea 2, Brighton 3. Enzo Fernandez opened the scoring. Levi Colwill made it 2. Buenanote pulled one back. Conor Gallagher, captain for the day, got himself sent off just on the stroke of half-time. But an Enzo Fernandez penalty after just horrendous defending from James Milner. And it is a stonewall penalty. And it should have been a red card. There's no attempt to play the ball. James Milner should have been sent off. Put Brighton 3, or Chelsea 3-1 up. Joe Pedro did pull one back in the 92nd minute, but it wasn't to be. That's a really poor result for Brighton, considering they played the entire second half against 10 men. A really, really poor result. But a great result for Chelsea, obviously. Chelsea are still 10th, 19 points. They're 10 points off top 4. They can give up any ideas of top 4. They're not good enough for top 4 this year. But potentially a Conference League spot will come their way. The team is starting to make a little bit more sense, although I didn't like the setup at the weekend. But they're dealing with injuries. For Brighton, they're 8th. They're just not very good at the moment. I mean, that's just the be-all of it. They're playing well in Europe. They haven't been good in the Premier League. They've already conceded 26 goals. You've only got Fulham, Bournemouth, Luton, Burnley, and Sheffield United who've conceded 26 or more along with them. That's not the company you want to be in. Now, they're scoring for fun. They've scored 30 goals this season. You've only got Newcastle, Villa, City, and Liverpool have scored more. Like, they've scored more than Arsenal. But they just can't defend. Like, Lewis Dunk's having a stinking season. He obviously missed the game at the weekend, suspended. Van Heck isn't very good. Steele isn't very good in goal. Igor hasn't done well so far this season. Webster's had a calamity of a year. The manager continues to play James Milner despite the fact he's a liability whenever he's on the pitch. Veltman has taken a significant step backwards. Estupinan has missed most of the season so far. There's mitigating circumstances. They obviously lost that outstanding defensive midfield presence in Moises Caicedo as well, which has been a big factor. And Baliba has been, he's been inconsistent. He was outstanding against Liverpool, but he's been inconsistent since joining. I don't really understand the decision not to start Pascal Gross. Now, I know he's played in the week, but if you're going to Chelsea, like, you're going away to Chelsea and you're walking out there with Adam Lallana in your team. Like, that's you're playing Hinchelwood at left back. There's no left back at the club that could have played. You couldn't have played Gross there. He's played there at least in the past. I don't really understand what De Zerbi's doing. Strange things at the moment, and I'm there's things he's doing this season that are a little bit alarming to me. He's still a very good manager, and the style of football is still great to watch. But there's things he's doing, decisions he's making that are a little bit alarming. West Ham won, Crystal Palace won. Mohamed Kudus opened the scoring. Odson Edouard missed a sitter and then was gifted an opportunity a couple of minutes later by Mavropanos. A scuffy shot, and I think it's one of those that went in because he scuffed it. I think the keeper saves it if he makes decent contact with it. But Palace were really good value for the draw, I thought. I thought that was a very evenly balanced game. And what it does is it leaves West Ham in 9th, 21 points. Palace are 12th, 16 points. Like, this was the epitome of a mid-table clash. And they look like two sides that are very evenly matched. And that's a Palace side, missing Doucouré, missing Eze. There's more to come from Palace, but I don't know if they'll get it under Roy. Roy is absolutely holding this team back. There's no question. They're capable of a lot more, but Roy at least guarantees you a floor of survival, and that's kind of what's important to Crystal Palace right now. Bournemouth 2, Aston Villa 2. Bournemouth really unfortunate not to win this one. Semenyo put them one up. Leon Bailey equalised. Solanke made it 2-1. And it looked like they were going to hold out, and they had some decent chances to get a third. But a brilliant header from Ollie Watkins on 90 minutes after Moussa Diaby cross gave Villa a point, and Villa will be happy to get out of there with a point. Villa didn't play well. Villa aren't as good away from home, obviously, as at home, but they'll take that point and they'll go home happy enough. They stay top 4. They're only a point behind Manchester City. I think if you'd said to a Villa fan 12 months ago, in 12 months, you'll be 1 point behind City, I guarantee you they would have replied, did they get 20 points deducted? Did all their good players leave? No, you're just a really good team now. It's as simple as that. You're a really good team. You're 4 points off top. You've been one of the best teams in the league for a year now. So congrats to Villa. It's a good point for Bournemouth against one of the better teams in the league. At home, yes, they would have liked to have won, but I think you take a point against one of those really good teams like Villa. And at some point, by the way, we're going to have to stop saying the Big Six and Newcastle, because Villa are a better team than Newcastle right now, and they every single bit deserve to be in that conversation. A, they're a big club. B, they've got a really good manager. C, they've got really good players. And D, they've got really ambitious owners who are spending money, who will back their manager. Villa belong in that conversation. When the Premier League started, Villa were one of the Big Six. And through incompetence, more than anything else, they lost that status. But Villa are historically a huge club and deserve their flowers. If we're going to say the Big Six and Newcastle, let's just turn it into the Big Eight and include Newcastle and Villa. You know? Anyway, Bournemouth, 6 points up above the relegation zone. People were writing them off. In the last 5 games, they've taken 10 points and they've turned things around. They're now level on points with Forest. They're 2 behind Fulham and Wolves. They're 3 behind Palace. I said I thought they'd be fine. I think they're going to be fine. I do think they're going to be fine. Iraola finally seems to have gotten the mixture right. They've still got really important players to come back from injury as well, remember. Like, they're missing a number of important players, most notably Tyler Adams and Alex Scott. When they get them back, they're going to be a decent team. I do think so. I do think they'll be a decent team. And it wouldn't surprise me if they finished above at least one, if not a couple, of Forest, Fulham, Wolves, and Crystal Palace. Moving on. Liverpool 4, Fulham 3. The stupidest game of football of the weekend. Trent opens the scoring from a free kick. It's going to be given as a Leno own goal, but it's Trent's goal. Harry Wilson makes it 1-1 after Trent falls asleep defensively, but McAllister makes it 2-1 with a world-class strike. Kenny Tete makes it 2-2 after McAllister falls asleep defensively. Bobby D. Cordova-Reid makes it 3-2 to Fulham after Liverpool fall asleep defensively. Wataru Endo scores Liverpool's third incredible goal of the game on 87 to make it 3-3. And then Trent gets the winner on 88 with Liverpool's fourth outstanding goal of the game. Liverpool did dominate, 26 shots, 12 on target to 9 and 5 from Fulham. They had 62% of the ball, but they were just... There was no control, there was no discipline, there was no plan. This was very much go out and express yourself, lads. This looked like a team that maybe had Frank Lampard in for a guest coaching spot. That might have been what happened. Liverpool might have just brought Frank in and said, look, Frank, you give them the instruction for this week. Right, lads, you're better than them. Go out there and express yourselves. And that's what they did. They went out and they ran around a little bit. They managed to win the game, and that's all that really matters. It keeps them in a strong position. They're second in the league, 2 points behind Arsenal. They've played a harder run of games than Arsenal, and they've got Arsenal coming downfield in a couple of weeks. So Liverpool are in really good nick. Fulham, they're hard to beat. They're a well-organised team. They're well coached. I can't believe Liverpool allowed them to score 3 goals, but it is what it is. They'll score 3 goals a couple more times this season, and they'll probably win those games. It's very, very rare you're going to have one team score 4 incredibly high degree of difficulty goals like Liverpool did in this game. So Fulham won't be too disheartened. Final game then, another stupid game. Manchester City 3, Tottenham 3. Heung-min Son opens the scoring on 6 minutes after Jeremy Doku, I guess, loses track of him. There's a long ball by Kulusevski. Doku looks like he's in prime position. Doesn't seem to realise Son is running around him. Son gets to the ball, somehow runs away from Doku, which is really strange, and finishes really well. 3 minutes later, Son puts into his own net to make it 1-1. Then there's a lovely little bit of link-up play between Doku, Alvarez, and Foden that ends up with Foden making it 2-1. But Giovanni Lo Celso scores a lovely goal on 69 to make it 2-2. Then Jack Grealish scores a tap-in after nice work by City to make it 3-2. And then, just because this game wasn't mental enough, cross into the box. Kyle Walker should probably do a little bit better with the cross. Nathan Ake gets caught underneath the cross. Kulusevski comes in like a train. And he heads it onto his own shoulder, which loops it past Ederson, and it's 3-3. And then, because Ange Postecoglou and Pep both hate draws, both sides are going for the win. Spurs leave themselves a little bit light at the back on a set piece. The ball gets cleared. Haaland gets fouled, gets back up. The ref seems to be signalling advantage. Haaland plays the ball over the top for Grealish, and the ref blows the whistle. Now, here's the thing. The defence was catching up to Grealish, and in all likelihood, Grealish is going to turn back rather than run straight for goal, because he's not going to outpace them. And he's probably going to try and draw a foul, because that's basically what Jack Grealish does. But in the moment, it looks really bad. Now, for City fans and journalists trying to compare it to Liverpool having a perfectly fine goal ruled out through incompetence, it's nothing like that. And you were also the first group to just turn around and say, oh, it's part of the game, so just get on with it. So just get on with it. No sympathy from me. There is a lot of people, though, saying this City team, they're not a patch on last year's team. We're 14 games in, City have 30 points. They're 3 points off top. Last season, after 14 games, City had 32 points. They were 5 points off top. So they're basically what they were the start of last season, but they don't have Gundogan. They don't have Kevin De Bruyne. They'll get KDB back, and I think they're going to be absolutely fine. I really do think they'll be absolutely fine. And they've got a tough game coming up next away to Villa. That could potentially be 4 draws in a row. But again, we look back at last season, and, you know, they had 30 points, 32 points before the World Cup, came back, They beat Leeds. Then they drew at home with Everton. Then they beat Chelsea. Then they lost to United. They beat Spurs. They beat Wolves. Then they lost to Spurs. So, through, what was that? That's 21 games last season. City were struggling a little bit. They weren't the same team as they had been previously. But then after that, City put together a run where they beat Villa, they beat Arsenal, they draw with Forest, and then they crack out 12 wins in a row because that's what they do. And they have the title wrapped up with a couple of games to go. That's what City do. That's why City will win the league again this season, because at some point they're going to do this. They're going to put together a long run of wins because that's who they are. So City are third, 3 points off top. That won't bother them in the slightest. It's a good point for Spurs, and it ends their 3-game losing streak. It also ends their 3-game losing streak of scoring first and then losing. And when Son scored the opener, that was my first thought, was this is going to be 4 games in a row where they score first and lose. But credit to them. They do get the point despite having no starting centre-backs, no Matar Sarr, and no Maddison. So 4 vital starters not in the team, and they go there and get a point. So that's really promising. They're 2 points behind Villa, 3 behind City, 4 behind Arsenal, 6 behind Spurs. Still very well positioned. And Ange is showing that he's a very, very good manager. We will take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about the FA Cup draw, which was made over the weekend, and we're going to do the news and gossip. So I will see you in a sec.
Making it to Wednesday is a win in itself, and Dunkin' thinks you deserve a reward. That's why every Wednesday, now through December, Dunkin' Rewards members get a free donut with drink purchase. So whether you like your midweek pick-me-ups oozing with chocolate or filled with jelly, it's on us, because you deserve it. Save time and order ahead on the app with Dunkin' Rewards. Not a member? Join today. America runs on Dunkin'. Limit 1 classic donut per member per Wednesday. Terms and exclusions may apply. Participation may vary. Offer ends 12/27/2023.
Right, welcome back. So, at the weekend, the second round of the FA Cup took place. Shrewsbury Town 3, Notts County 2. If you haven't seen those goals, please, I beg you, go and look at those goals. That is some of the worst defending you'll ever see by one team from Notts County. All 3 goals are an abomination. Ryan Bowman gets the hat-trick for Shrewsbury, taking advantage of the worst defensive display you'll ever see. Wigan beat York City 1-0. Maidstone United beat Barrow 2-1. Morecambe beat Wycombe Wanderers 2-0. Blackpool versus Forest Green was postponed. Cambridge United 4, Fleetwood Town 0. Bolton 5, Harrogate 1. Peterborough 2, Doncaster 1. Gillingham 2, Charlton Athletic 0. Stevenage 1, Port Vale 1. That game is to be replayed on the 12th. Newport against Barnet ended 1-1. That one is also to be replayed on the 12th. Oxford 2, Grimsby 0. Sutton United 3, Horsham 0. Sutton were meant to play Barnsley originally, but Barnsley were thrown out of the competition for fielding an ineligible player. So Horsham were allowed back in, but they've lost the second time. Eastleigh 2, Reading 1. So that's a bit of a giant killing. That is Conference League beating League 1. Chesterfield 1, Leyton Orient 0. Aldershot 2, Stockport 2. That game will also be replayed on the 12th. And then Wrexham 3, Yeovil 0. So Wrexham through. We have one game today that is AFC Wimbledon against Ramsgate. That game is tonight at 7:45. We have a game tomorrow, Alfreton Town against Walsall, 7:45 kickoff. And then Crewe and Bristol, which was postponed, is also on the 12th, as I assume will be the Blackpool Forest Green game. I assume that one will also be played on the 12th. So the draw was made, and we have the following third round. Premier League Luton against League One Bolton Wanderers. League One Shrewsbury against League Two Wrexham. Premier League Arsenal versus Premier League Liverpool in what is undoubtedly the tie of the round. Championship Stoke at home to Premier League Brighton. Championship Norwich at home to either League Two Crewe or League One Bristol Rovers. Premier League West Ham versus Championship Bristol City. Premier League versus Premier League again as we get Tottenham versus Burnley. Premier League Fulham against Championship Rotherham. Championship Rotherham will play either National League Aldershot or League Two Stockport. Championship Southampton against either National League... Are they National League South? National League North, Alfrington Town, or League Two Walsall. League Two AFC Wimbledon versus Isthmian League Southeast Division Ramsgate at home to Championship, the second place team, Ipswich. So that's a good draw for either of those teams in terms of bringing in a good team. You know, they'll get beaten, I'd imagine, but still, it's a bit of a glamour draw for them. League One, Peterborough against Championship Leeds. Championship Millwall against Championship Leicester. Championship Watford against National League Chesterfield. This is a cracker. Championship Sunderland against Premier League Newcastle in the old Tyne-Wear derby. So looking forward to that one. Championship Sheffield Wednesday versus Championship Cardiff. Premier League Crystal Palace versus Premier League Everton. Championship Aston Villa versus Championship Middlesbrough versus Premier League Aston Villa in the Gareth Southgate derby. Premier League Nottingham Forest against either League One Blackpool or League Two Forest Green Rovers. League One Wigan against Premier League Manchester United. Championship Blackburn against League One Cambridge. League Two Gillingham against Premier League Sheffield United. Championship Swansea against League Two Morecambe. Premier League Chelsea against Championship Preston North End. Championship QPR against Premier League Bournemouth. Championship Coventry against League One Oxford. Championship Premier League Brentford against Premier League Wolves. Championship Plymouth against League Two Sutton. National League South Maidstone United against either League One Stevenage or League One Port Vale. League Two Newport or National League Barnet against National League Eastleigh. So that's a really good one. Potentially there, we're going to definitely have a non-league side in League Two in the fourth round. And then Championship League Two. Championship Hull against Championship Birmingham. So that should be a decent game as well. Obviously, Liverpool going to the Emirates to take on Arsenal is the tie of the round, but some other good ones there. I really like the Tyne-Wear derby. Palace Everton is a decent game. Borough Villa will be decent because Borough are at home. All things considered, I think it's a pretty good draw. Now I know Liverpool fans are a bit annoyed that, why do we always get a tough draw? But you're going to have to play these teams at some point. Did I mention Premier League City against Championship Huddersfield? I might have skipped that one. City always get an easy draw third round. So do United. That's just how it is. It just there's no point in complaining about it. I'm all in on this competition thus far. I think this is going to be great. So I'm looking forward to it. If Liverpool lose, they lose. I still think they're going to win the Europa League. I still think they'll win the EFL Cup. And I still think they'll get second in the league. And if they do that, I'm going to be happy with the season. What's not to be happy about? Moving on then. So the BBC are the latest to report that Sheffield United are set to sack Heckingbottom. It hasn't happened as of time of recording, which is just gone 4:00. So we'll wait and see. There's people suggesting that Chris Wilder would be an excellent appointment. I don't think so. I really don't think so. Chris Wilder obviously did a very, very good job when he was there the first time. There's no question he did an outstanding job. But since leaving, he was very poor with Middlesbrough and he was a disaster with Watford. So I'm really not sure what logic there is into saying that him coming back is a very good move. He hasn't done well since leaving. Now, maybe it is just that he has a bit of magic at the club, but he's not going to have the same backroom staff because some of them have gone their own way. And it's a horrible situation to take over where they're bottom of the league and looking a little bit homeless. I mean, they're hopeless. They were bottom of the league and looking hopeless when he left. I don't really know. We'll have to wait and see what they do. If they go with him, it just seems like a backward step to me. Anyway, let's move on and just get the gossip wrapped up. Juventus forward Matthias Sula, who is currently on loan at Frosinone, is attracting interest from Premier League side Newcastle. The 20-year-old Argentine is very, very highly regarded. He's a very good young player. Now, he can play up front, he can play wide, he can play in attacking midfield. I wonder, would he play... You'd imagine the likely role for him in a Newcastle team would be the Almiron role. That's probably the best spot for him. I'd be hard pressed to see Juve selling him, but the financial situation is not great. Manchester United could sell Jadon Sancho and Donny van de Beek to Juventus for just 26 million. No chance of that. So Jim Ratcliffe, who is yet to complete the deal to take over football operations at Manchester United, is already in discussions about the future of the club's on-loan English forward, Mason Greenwood. And hopefully that means he's going to ensure that United cut ties with Mason Greenwood and don't have that stain on their reputation anymore. Some Everton players could seek compensation from the club for loss of earnings if they're relegated following their 10-point deduction. That seems like nonsense to me. Jean-Claire Todibo remains a candidate for a winter move to Manchester United. I don't know what that means. Atletico Madrid president Enrique Cerezo says João Felix will return to the club if Barcelona choose not to make his loan stay at the Nou Camp permanent. I don't think they can actually afford to do that at the moment, but we'll see what happens come summer. They might. I could see a big sale at Barca in the coming kind of 8 months, one of the next two windows. Manchester United's midfielder Kobe Manu will double his wages from 10,000 to 20,000 should he become a regular. It's actually if he plays, I think it's 16 or 17 games or something. It's a thing United have done for years. Then he does get his wages bumped. Bayern Munich forward Thomas Muller has been linked to the move to Manchester United after being urged by Lothar Matthäus to seek game time elsewhere. I think Thomas Muller might go to the MLS. I don't see him moving to Manchester United. But then this piece says Muller is likely to extend his contract, with sporting director Christoph Freund pushing to get the new deal done. Marcos Alonso knows Barcelona will not extend his contract beyond the summer of 2024, and he could return to the Premier League or move to Saudi Arabia. I don't see him returning to the Premier League because he's not very good. Nottingham Forest could face a January transfer embargo over late payment fees owed to agent. Wow. I just don't believe that, to be fair. West Ham are set to have applied to have the London Stadium capacity expanded to 68,000 on match days, which would make it the second largest Premier League ground behind Old Trafford. That seems strange. Let's have a look. So as of this moment, the capacity is 62,500. There is a seated capacity of 66,000, but the regulated capacity is 62,500. Now, if we look at West Ham's games, home to Chelsea, pretty full. Home to City, pretty full. Home to Sheffield United, to be fair, yeah, to be fair, I mean, they're getting basically capacity crowds every week, like 20, 30 short of full capacity. But that's still really, really impressive that West Ham are drawing that type of crowd. Last season, yeah, I mean, every single game is 62,000 plus. Yeah, fair play. I genuinely didn't realize that. Right, let's see. Last season, they had the second highest attendance in the league. Now, they do have the second highest capacity in the league as things stand. About 500, 400 and odd more than Spurs. But yeah, they are getting the numbers in. So fair play. They might as well extend it if they can. Good on West Ham. They got a lot of crap over this move. And to their credit, it's worked out. And I'm going to leave it there. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Sports Social Podcast Network.
Reproductive Medicine Associates commercial, take one.
RMA is a fertility center where next-level science and proven treatment plans turn big dreams into big reality. Realities like me. Start your fertility journey today. Learn more at rmanetwork.com. rmanetwork.com.